In the world of military power and backroom deals, some secrets are just too good to be true. For decades, the alliance between Canada and the United States has been the bedrock of North American defense. But what happens when that bedrock starts to crack? What if Canada, feeling squeezed by Washington, decided to make a move so bold, so defiant, it could change the power balance on the continent for good? Is Canada secretly planning to betray its most important military alliance? While the official story is all about the F-35 fighter jet, a wild rumor is tearing through the halls of power. A secret, off-the-books deal for 120 Swedish Gripen fighters. We're going to expose the truth behind this supposed challenge to Washington and what it really means for North America's defense. And the answer is not what you think. To get why these rumors even exist, you have to understand the official story. And that story is one of the most painful, politically charged, and flat-out expensive military purchases in Canadian history. It's a mess that's been 15 years in the making. It all started with the Royal Canadian Air Force's aging fleet of CF-18 Hornets. These jets have been workhorses since the 80s, flying missions everywhere from the Balkans to Iraq. But by the 2010s, they were getting old. Their frames were tired, and their tech was falling behind. Canada needed a replacement, and that search kicked off a decade of political warfare. In 2010, the Conservative government announced its plan to buy 65 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters. Seems simple enough. The F-35 was sold as the future, a stealthy, networked marvel that would keep Canada in lockstep with its most important ally. The U.S.-Canada was already a partner in the program, with Canadian industry building parts for the jets. The choice seemed like a no-brainer, but the deal hit a wall of opposition, fast. The Liberal Party attacked the decision, but the real killer was the cost. The Parliamentary Budget Officer released reports showing the true lifetime cost would be way higher than what the government was admitting. The F-35 became a symbol of wasteful spending. So, in the 2015 election, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau made a famous promise. His government would not buy the F-35. When he won, Trudeau kept his word, scrapping the plan and launching a new, open competition. Years went by. The old CF-18s just got older. To fill the gap, Canada even bought used F-18s from Australia, a move critics called an embarrassing stopgap. Finally, in a reversal that shows you just how powerful the American defense industry is, Trudeau's government announced in 2022 that the winner was the F-35. The final deal for 88 jets was signed in early 2023 with a sticker price of 19 billion Canadian dollars. But Canada's own Auditor General warned that figure was already out of date, with the real purchase cost climbing and the full life cycle cost estimated to soar past 74 billion. The first jets were set to arrive in 2026. After a decade of fighting, the debate seemed over. Canada was getting its F-35s. It was a done deal, or so everyone thought. This public story of a settled, finished deal is the perfect setup for the chaos that followed. It created a sense of finality that made the whispers that began to emerge after the 2025 Canadian election so jarring, because behind the scenes, a different story was taking shape. One of defiance and of a certain Swedish jet that just wouldn't take no for an answer. Just as the ink was drying on the F-35 contracts, the ghost of a past competitor came back to haunt Ottawa. And this wasn't a faint echo. It was an aggressive, brilliantly executed campaign by Sweden's Saab, the maker of the JAS-39 Gripen. The Gripen came in second in the competition, but Saab wasn't settling for a silver medal. It saw a political opening and flew right through it. The whispers started in the halls of power and in defense journals. Talk of Saab executives holding intensive discussions with Canadian officials, not to complain about the lost competition, but to propose something new, something audacious. The rumor mill kicked into high gear, spitting out a story that seemed impossible, that Canada was secretly looking to buy a massive fleet of European jets. The numbers being thrown around were huge. Not just a few extra planes, but an order for 72, 80, or even up to 120 Gripen E fighters. This was a direct challenge to Canada's entire defense policy. Sensing a shift in the political winds after the Canadian election and growing tensions with the U.S., Saab launched a full-scale charm offensive, and its proposal was designed to exploit every single weakness of the F-35. In early 2026, those whispers became a roar. Reports surfaced that Saab had formally submitted an unsolicited proposal to the Canadian government. The package was stunning. It wasn't just for Gripen fighters, but also included Saab's advanced GlobalEye airborne early warning aircraft, which are built on a jet platform from Canada's own Bombardier. This was a masterclass in industrial politics. Saab wasn't just selling a plane. It was selling a vision of Canadian industrial sovereignty. The core of the deal was a promise of full domestic production. Gripens for Canada would be built in Canada by Canadians. Saab promised a new production line in Canada, possibly partnering with a local giant like IMP Aerospace or Bombardier. And then came the jobs number, designed for maximum political impact, a promise of around 10,000 high-tech jobs. It was a vision of a reborn aerospace industry and full technology transfer. With Gripen, Saab said, the Royal Canadian Air Force would have total control of its fighter, a guarantee of sovereignty for decades. This was a direct appeal to Canada's deep desire to be masters of its own house, not just renters in an American-built one. This was the first real crack in the F-35 done deal. The proposal was so aggressive and so perfectly tailored to Canada's anxieties that it couldn't be ignored. The Swedish ghost was no longer a whisper. It was a real plan, sitting on desks in Ottawa, tempting a new government that was already feeling some buyer's remorse. So why would a country even think about defying its closest ally and sinking a billion-dollar contract that took a decade to sign? The answer is a powerful mix of money, jobs, and a burning desire for sovereignty. The rumors didn't come from nowhere. They grew in fertile ground, prepared by years of F-35 controversy and a big shift in the geopolitical landscape. First, just follow the money. The F-35 has always been plagued by its eye-watering price tag. The initial $19 billion for 88 jets is a huge number, but it's the long-term running costs that really terrify accountants. Canada's own budget watchdog estimated the full life cycle cost could blow past $74 billion. The Gripen, on the other hand, is marketed as the smart fighter. It's designed for efficiency and lower operational costs. If the F-35 is a high-maintenance supercar, the Gripen is like a rugged rally car, tough, adaptable, and serviceable by a small crew with basic tools. Saab promises it can fly more often for a lot less money. For a government staring down a massive bill, the idea of getting a fighter that's not only cheaper to buy but dramatically cheaper to fly for the next 40 years is incredibly tempting. Second, it's the dream of a revitalized Canadian industry. Sure, the F-35 program gives some work to Canadian companies, but many feel they got shortchanged. The work is scattered across a global supply chain, and Canada gets no final say or sovereign control. Saab's proposal weaponized this feeling perfectly. It wasn't just offering contracts, it was offering a crown jewel. The promise to build the Gripen and the GlobalEye in Canada is a game changer. Saab promised that every dollar Canada spent would be reinvested back into the Canadian economy. They offered full technology transfer, giving Canada the keys to maintain, upgrade, and maybe even export the jets in the future. It would create a sovereign capability Canada hasn't had since the legendary Avro Arrow was canceled back in 1959. It reframes the deal from a military purchase to a national industrial strategy. The third, and maybe most critical motive, is sovereignty. This works on two levels, operational and political. Operationally, the Gripen is arguably a better fit for Canada's massive, unforgiving geography. The F-35 needs long, clean runways and a ton of support infrastructure, things that are in short supply in the Canadian Arctic. The Gripen, born from Sweden's need to operate even if its main air bases are bombed, is the opposite. It can take off from short, damaged runways and even public highways. It can be refueled and rearmed by a small crew in minutes. That rugged, independent approach is perfect for the realities of Arctic operations. Politically, the argument is even stronger. The F-35 is a closed ecosystem controlled by the U.S. All software, data, and spare parts are managed by the Pentagon and Lockheed Martin. There are real concerns about a so-called kill switch, a mechanism that would let the U.S. ground Canada's entire fleet during a political dispute. In an era of trade wars and a more unpredictable America, that level of dependence is seen as a huge vulnerability. Saab's offer of full sovereign control is the direct antidote to this fear. It's an escape from what some see as a technological leash held by Washington. Together, these motives make a powerful case for why Canada would be willing to risk a massive political crisis to explore a secret deal. Of course, these rumors didn't go unnoticed south of the border. Washington's reaction was fast, public, and loaded with a kind of pressure you rarely see between allies. This was the part of the story Washington truly didn't expect. Not that Canada might be having second thoughts, but the raw, unfiltered response it would provoke. The main weapon for American pressure was NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. This unique joint command is the heart of the U.S.-Canada alliance, and it became Washington's biggest hammer. In a series of surprisingly blunt public statements in early 2026, U.S. officials started issuing stark warnings. The former U.S. ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, had previously warned that if Ottawa chose a less interoperable aircraft, a clear shot at the Gripen, then NORAD itself would have to be altered. The threat was clear. If Canada didn't bring the F-35 to the party, the U.S. would have to fly its own F-35s into Canadian airspace to do the job. It was a barely veiled threat to undermine Canadian sovereignty in the name of continental security. F-35 backers claimed the Gripen just couldn't plug into the high-tech network NORAD relies on. The subtext was obvious. Choose the Gripen, and Canada becomes a second-class citizen in its own defense. This was all supercharged by concerns over a data network called Link 16. The Gripen is fully compatible with it, but the system contains sensitive American encryption hardware that requires U.S. permission to use. The unspoken threat was that Washington could just deny Canada access, crippling the jet's ability to work with American forces. Washington's heavy-handedness was amplified by years of a strained relationship. The Trump presidency, with its tariffs and threats, had created deep mistrust in Canada. Many Canadians started to see the U.S. not just as a difficult partner, but as a potential risk to their interests. The F-35 became a lightning rod for this frustration. The decision by the new Canadian government, elected in 2025 to even entertain the Gripen proposal, was a direct result of this mood. In this context, Washington's threats backfired. Instead of scaring Ottawa into line, they were seen as bullying and proof of Canada's worst fears, that the U.S. saw Canada as a subordinate, not a partner. This created a perfect storm. On one side, the Canadian military establishment warned that a mixed fleet would be a logistical nightmare. On the other, a surge of public support grew for the Gripen as a symbol of Canadian independence. Washington's pressure campaign had turned a procurement decision into a full-blown sovereignty crisis. And now we get to the heart of the mystery. After all the rumors, motives, and fallout, it's time to answer the big question. Is Canada secretly buying 120 Gripen fighters? The uncomfortable and maybe for some disappointing truth is no. There is no credible evidence of a secret purchase order for 120 or even 80 Gripen fighters. The number itself seems to be pure speculation, born from online forums and clickbait headlines. The story of a secret betrayal, as good as it sounds, just isn't backed up by the facts. In fact, the reality is far more interesting. At the same time the Gripen rumors were peaking in early 2026, Canada's new government under Prime Minister Mark Carney was quietly doing the opposite. In February 2026, it was confirmed that Ottawa had made payments for a second batch of 14 F-35s, bringing its total firm commitment to 30 jets. You don't spend hundreds of millions on F-35 parts while secretly signing a contract to replace them. So, if the secret order is a myth, what's the real story? The truth Washington didn't expect wasn't a secret contract. It was the open and serious consideration of a radical new strategy for the Royal Canadian Air Force, the mixed fleet. The bombshell wasn't that Canada would ditch the F-35, but that it was planning to cap its purchase at a much smaller number, maybe just the 30 jets it was committed to, and buy a large fleet of European fighters to fly alongside them. The real debate was never about replacing the F-35, but about complementing it. This is the real power play. Proponents of this high-low mix argued Canada should buy a small fleet of high-end F-35s for its most demanding NORAD and NATO missions. These would be the silver bullets. The rest of the force, the workhorses, would be a much larger fleet of Gripens, maybe 72 or more. They would handle the day-to-day work, patrolling the Arctic, sovereignty flights, and training. Because the Gripen is so much cheaper to fly, Canada could actually afford to be present across its vast territory. This is the revolutionary idea that caught Washington off guard. The U.S. assumes its allies will go all in on American systems. Canada openly flirting with a dual fleet was a direct challenge to that. It was a signal that Canada wanted a solution tailored to its needs, not just a copy of the American model. The secret 120 Gripen order was a ghost story, but it was a cover for a very real and disruptive idea. Knowing the real story is about a potential mixed fleet doesn't end the debate, it just reframes it. This whole saga, a mix of genuine national interest, clever marketing by Saab, and a high-stakes negotiation by Ottawa, has set the stage for a new era in North American defense. First, there's the fierce argument over logistics versus flexibility. Critics argue that operating two different fighter jets would be a logistical nightmare. Two training pipelines, two sets of mechanics, two supply chains. They say the costs would eat up any savings from the Gripen's lower flight hour cost, resulting in a less capable Air Force. But proponents say that complexity is the price of flexibility. A mixed fleet lets you use the right tool for the right job, saving the expensive F-35s for when they're truly needed, while the cheaper Gripens do the daily grind. It gives Canada options, and in the 21st century, options are priceless. The second debate is over interoperability. Washington's big claim was that the Gripen would break NORAD, but evidence has been chipping away at that. During NATO missions, Danish F-35s have been seen operating just fine alongside Swedish Gripens, sharing data over the standard Link 16 network. Saab itself has stated the Gripen passed all of Canada's own security and interoperability tests during the competition. This changes the argument entirely. It's no longer a technical problem, it's a political one. The question isn't if the Gripen can be integrated, but if the U.S. would allow it. Washington's leverage isn't technology, it's political control over the network keys. This forces Canada into a tough choice: stick with an all F-35 fleet for maximum integration, or accept some political friction with Washington to gain more control over its own defense. The secret 120 Gripen order was a fiction, but it was a fiction that did real work. It allowed a middle power to create breathing room with a superpower. The truth Washington didn't expect wasn't a secret betrayal, but a public declaration of independence, a sign that its northern partner was willing to question the established order and forge its own path, even if it meant facing the anger of its closest friend. The ghost of the Gripen may never actually fly in the Canadian sky, but its shadow has already redrawn the map of power in North America. This story is far from over. What do you think this means for the future of the U.S.-Canada alliance? Is a mixed fleet a brilliant move or a logistical disaster? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives that unpack the strategy behind the hardware, stick around for our next video.